And this point is a calendrical one, and that is found within the astronomical book section, as it describes a very unique calendar that only the Qumran community was using at this time, and that is a 364-day solar calendar. Now, since there's 11 chapters in Enoch devoted to this topic, is that we do need to park on this for a little bit, as it does come up in a lot in academic discussions on how to potentially make sense out of the 1,290 and 1,335 days that are referenced in Daniel at the very end in chapter 12. So let's read some selected passages to understand how they made sense of a 364-day solar calendar. 74:12. And the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. The main thing here is that the writer is claiming that this is a perfect calendar and needs no intercalation, i.e. inserting of days, weeks, or months periodically like we do every 4 years in February. In their mind, this is God's eternal calendar. And they doubled down on this by giving us 3 examples of the totals of days over a 3, 5, and 8 year period. And in the next verse, in this next verse, and all of these are 364-day years when you divide them out. This is taking basically a pot shot at the lunar solar system that basically most Jews were using at this time back in Jerusalem, where there was at least 2, if not 3 intercalations of an extra month over a 7-year period. So, when they give that, 3, 5, and 8 year period, it's just like, hey, look, even over a whole Sabbath of years, we don't do any intercalation. The writer explains this calendar more by saying, and the year is accurately completed in conformity with their world stations and the stations of the sun, which rise from the portals through which it, the sun, rises and sets 30 days. The portals of the sun here is describing the sun as it appears to travel along the ecliptic and passes through the 12 zodiacal constellations in the night sky each year. This is most clearly described in 75:4 with the description of 12 doors with the sun charioting in heaven going through each of them. So this gives us 360 days currently. The remaining 4 days were described in 3 verses before this that say, and the leaders of the heads of the thousands, who are placed over the whole creation and over all the stars, have also to do with the 4 intercalary days. So 4 additional days are inserted in on the annual calendar. 82:4 describes how the 4 divide the 4 portions of the year. So the Enochian calendar can be diagrammed out in the following manner, with the spring being the start of the new year, and as you likely assume from the description is that the 4 intercalary days are the annual equinoxes and solstices. Thus, each portion of the year is composed of 13 weeks of 91 days that altogether is 52 weeks, equating to 364 days. Now, I'm sure the most obvious thought coming through your head is that, well, that's still not a true solar year. It's still off by 1.25 days on average. Yes, but basically the Qumran community didn't care. And truth be told is that scholarship has no clue on how the community handled this glaring issue, because Passover had to be kept in the spring, because many rituals like waving of the sheaf offering had to be done in the spring, and other agricultural offerings were also aligned to the other feasts as well. How they dealt with that, again, is another issue that nobody in the academic community knows anything for sure on. So, just in case you read or watch something that says that this calendar is perfect and should be the one that we follow today, is that it's not. There are astronomical and biblical problems with it. Nonetheless, this is the writer of Enoch's so-called perfect solar calendar. Now, we do learn a bit of why they adopted this calendar, as one of its goals was to keep the festivals falling on the exact same day each year, meaning that Passover would always occur on the second Tuesday of the first month on the 14th day. There's no deviation in any of this. Now, don't get confused by looking at the chart here and by thinking that, are they making Tuesday be the seventh day of the week, i.e. the Sabbath day? No. What they're doing is making the first day of the first month, the new year, to always start on Wednesday, the fourth day of the week. Because on the fourth day of creation week is that God created the sun and said that it is to be used for calendrical purposes. Now, I get it if you're like, yeah, but God created the moon too that day with the same described purpose. I get it, but just wash that away in your head and just keep rolling with what they're thinking here. And we see more descriptions of this as the Jubilees writer expanded on day 4 verse by saying that, and God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days, and for Sabbaths, and for months, and for feasts, and for years, and for Sabbaths of years, and for jubilees, and for all seasons of the years. This is quite clearly saying that only the sun is to be our guide in the calendar. Just forget about the moon and how it was always used for basically all the centuries in Jewish thinking that determined a new month with the appearance of a new crescent moon appearing. The Qumran community didn't care. In a little bit, we're going to see why they didn't care about it. Now, this obviously begs the question, if the Jubilees writer had the same Enochian calendar going on in his head. And the answer is yes. Jubilees 29:16 quite clearly alludes to the 4 intercalary days occurring at the annual equinoxes and solstices. Jubilees 6:29 describes each portion of the year having 13 weeks, totaling 52 weeks of days, and the Jubilees writer says, "And there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. And command thou the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year." So, there's the explicit statement that a 364 solar day year is to be used year in and year out. Now, the Qumran community knew about the lunar year and its difference with this calendar, but regardless, the Jubilees writer says the following: "And they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feasts. But if they do not neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget, and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of the days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant, and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance." There's the big issue for them. The Qumran community was so disgusted by the pagans and saw that by using the same calendar as them, that eventually their feast to Yahweh would fall on the same days and potentially cause same days as pagan festivals, and potentially cause Jews to celebrate both or become apostate, like recently you read in during the Maccabean period under Antiochus. He, the Jubilees writer, continues to say that, "For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon." This shows that they knew their Jewish contemporaries were using a lunar solar calendar with the annual feast falling on different days of the week. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to thee that thou mayest testify to them. For after thy death thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. So, we know that the Qumran community was using this 364-day solar calendar as we find it in both books of Enoch and Jubilees. What's interesting is that there are scrolls that contain fragments in the Qumran community that are actually trying to sync the lunar and solar calendars together. But they are too fragmented to make any broad conclusions on how they might have synced up the calendars year in and year out. And as said earlier, is that this 364-day calendar causes, annual drifting that would eventually have the Passover and other festivals falling back, with like Passover happening in the winter. Another issue, though, for the Qumran community was that all male Jews were obligated to come to Jerusalem for the three main festivals, of which are the unleavened bread, the harvest, and the ingathering, all of which were tied to agricultural seasons. What's interesting is Josephus says that the Essenes were prohibited from coming to the temple court. A quick sidebar here from this statement is that this is one of the reasons why an overwhelming majority of scholars do not categorize John the Baptist, Jesus, and his followers as Essenes. Jesus, John, and all his disciples, they attended all the festivals in Jerusalem that the Sanhedrin, who were made up of Pharisees and Sadducees, annually put together. Now, outside of Enoch and Jubilees, is that we do get allusions to this calendar in other Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1QS, we see the reference to the appointed times, and that they are not to deviate in the smallest detail from any of God's words, as these apply to their own time. They are neither to advance their holy times nor to postpone any of their prescribed festivals. This is quite similar to what we just read in Jubilees. Now, with the barring from the temple in Jerusalem and the ever-drifting issue was that you kind of get the sense that the Qumran community knew that these were big issues for them. But nonetheless was that they were an apocalyptic community, that they felt that God was very soon going to set everything right again, and that as the sons of light, they had the true calendar in their hands, and the rest of Israel was an heir. So in their minds, it was better to stay away from Jerusalem, don't use that calendar, and just practice, if you will, out in the desert how it should actually be going. And eventually, in one day, in short time in their thinking, is that God is going to put it all back in order and they're going to get rewarded for their obedience. The wording of this kind of thinking is found in the Damascus document, and that we can get this when it does refer to 364-day calendar, and is later in the document it directly refers to the Book of Jubilees as the Book of Divisions and Seasons. Now, there is one more thing that needs to be brought up about the 4 intercalary days, and that is whether or not the Qumran community actually counted them in the year. And I know that just kind of like, what do you mean they didn't count them? What? Yes, I get it. But the thing is that 74:12 said that even though it said that a perfect year is 364 days, thus it looks like they did count them in, is that right before this in verse 11 it says the following: "And the overplus of the sun and of the stars amounts to 6 days. In 5 years, 6 days every year comes to 30 days. And the moon falls behind the sun and the stars to a number of 30 days." Now, the only way that you can make that statement is if you get 6 more days, is that you're only working with 30-day months. And you're excluding the 4 intercalary days in your calculation. Yet, verse 12 says that there is 364 days in a year. And at the very end of the astronomical book in Enoch, in chapter 82, it says that the 4 intercalary days are said to be counted in. As 82:6 says that, "For they belong to the reckoning of the year and are truly recorded thereon forever. And the year is completed in 364 days." So why did I bring up this, what appears to look like a discrepancy within the text? Well, because it is there. And since it is that it gets scholars kind of thinking like Boccaccini, he's probably the most well-known in this, and others, kind of proposing different means to how we could maybe get Daniel 12's numbers. Boccaccini's is a good work. I enjoyed the read, but it's also expensive because it's produced by Brill. His view is that both Daniel and Enoch used the same solar calendar, and that its final form was calculated as 360 plus 4 calendar because of the description in 74:11. So basically it's still 364, but there's kind of like this division, where you don't necessarily count them, but they're there, but they're not. It's kind of a weird thing. So Boccaccini contends that Daniel had only the 360 portion in his mind when writing out chapter 12, as they are equal to 3.5 years plus 1 month, with the second number being an additional 45 days, or you could say 1.5 months, more than 1,290, which is connected to the 3.5-year period as described as time, times, and half a time. Now, Boccaccini is a late dater of Daniel and sees all this ending with Antiochus. But his thought experiment is worth thinking about because John's 3.5-year period is stated as 1,260 days and 42 months by clearly using a 360-day figure as his year length. Now, I'm not going to go veering off here because it's just going to get us way too ahead of ourselves, but we'll come back to Boccaccini's work more when we get to chapter 12. Now, the final note on this 360-day calendar potential is that the flood timeline in Genesis 7 and 8 says that the waters prevailed for 150 days from the 17th of the second month to the 17th of the 7th month. So, this span of time is exactly 5 months of 30 days each. In a lunar solar calendar is that you cannot find a 5-month span that has 30 days in them consecutively. So you can make a scriptural case for a 360-day calendar. Reminder, hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, and leave a comment. And don't forget to visit us at justscripture.org. And in the meantime, stay salty.